Hi, and welcome to the second episode of DAOnauts, Journey into Web3. This is Alex and Matei, and before we start this episode, we would like to start with a tweet from Jess, and it says the following: the best DAOs will solve Web3 problems, not Web2 problems. And why is this an important subject? Because when we dive into Web3 and DAOs in general, we want to we don't want to bring the problems from traditional organizations into the space. We want to bring the solutions and implement them in Web3. So I think this is he's making a good point here. And this is also a good starting point for the first subject of today, and that's KPIs. So we will start with defining what is a key performance indicator, why they are important, their potential negative effects if you stray from the definition and turn them into targets, the proper ways to use KPIs, and how you can implement constructive feedback, and how do we define success. So, what are your thoughts on this, Matei? And I'm curious to see what we can extract from this conversation.
Yeah, that's a very good beginning for our discussion because, as you said, we should focus on bringing what's best out of Web 2, implement it into Web 3, and then deal with our own problems because we certainly already have some and will most definitely encounter some along the way. And as you said, we could start with KPIs, right? In DAOs this time.
Right. This is a very important subject because due to their decentralized nature, DAOs struggle with determining and measuring value, the things that are created. So KPIs can help in this regard, but we must be wary of this because anything that sounds like a KPI can get complicated. So by definition, a KPI is a key performance indicator. So they are showing you what is working and what is not. So I'm seeing a lot of people turning KPIs into targets, and that's a thing that they are taking from more traditional organizations. And I've recently saw a podcast with Chase Chapman and Aaron Dignan from Brave New Work, and they talked about these issues in detail. So what the most important takes from that is that KPIs that presume that there is measurable value inside of any statement are just going to fail because that's not how value is created in complex systems. And the point is, how can you measure something before you even start it? What's your opinion of that on that?
Yeah, I think what you just said is a really good point because exactly that's the question. How do you measure it before you create it? Well, when you're talking about financial systems such as revenue creating or fees or taxes, you could look at, let's say, simply your revenue streams, how much money you're making, how much money you're projected to make in the following months, quarters, years, and so on. But in a DAO, especially when you're not in an investment or a venture DAO, how do you deal with creating value out of your culture, out of events, out of simply vibes? What do you think?
Um, yeah, that's almost impossible to quantify, and this is the tricky part. So rather than starting with quantifiable outcomes, we should start with the principles of what we are trying to do and how that will ideally look, because we must clarify what are the things that we can measure that are actually going to be useful, because sometimes models sometimes, almost always, models are wrong, and having flexibility in DAOs and ways to adapt is very important, right? Like, I can't stress that enough. So this also ties into Goodhart's law, which says that when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure, and that's going to get people to hijack the system most of the times. And any observed statistical regularity will tend to collapse once pressure is placed upon it for control purposes, if it makes sense. What are your 2 cents on that?
Well, regarding this, I've recently listened to a podcast by Chaser Chapman, I believe, and they use this example. The example says, okay, let's say you are an HR team. You're looking to hire or simply have contributors join your DAO. The most simple Web2 KPI you would use is, okay, how many people are we able to hire in a month, let's say. But that will, as you said, this will simply lead the team to hire more people. Does this mean the overall value increases? No, definitely not. Not necessarily, I mean. There could simply be more people, but there can sometimes be too many chefs in a kitchen, and that slows everything down. And so you have to think about it. Okay, we should need a better KPI. How should we think about this? And you could, as I said earlier, you could look at the value created. You could see the employees or contributors performance over time, and some other stuff like that. But as you just said, it's hard to quantify, and for this reason, we could maybe look at the final goal instead of simply using KPIs as targets. We should look at KPIs as some direction, because that's what they are, right? They're indicators. They're not targets. And so we could steer some ships using them, but we shouldn't simply guide our entire organization and process based on them.
Right. Because if you are stating that a person is going to get paid for reaching a target, you lost track of what a KPI actually is. That's against the definition. And it's in our capitalist nature to measure things and optimize for good performance. And that's okay. But we also have to understand the human side of things, because we are very complex creatures. And when people are started to be forced into doing something, they will find ways unconsciously to bypass the standard process, and that can lead to a lot of bad things, and we want to avoid that and let people do things more naturally. Also, I would like to ask you about defining success in DAOs, and I think there's a lot of room for discussion on that.
I think we could definitely hold an episode just for this specific question. Measuring success, I think, is just a matter of what you're doing and how you want to do it. I believe that two similar, maybe almost identical DAOs with, and similar, I mean common values, goals, achievements, but with different people in their community, could have vastly different performance indicators or simply success measurement tools. And I will bounce this back to you. What do you think?
I think a successful DAO is a DAO that can build on trust. It's a DAO where people implicitly trust each other, and they allow each other to do the work in their most efficient way and at their personal pace. And when that happens, a kind of harmony starts to be put in place, and things just flow. Like, this is a parallel that I like, because the DAO it ties to the DAO from the Taoism, where the religion talks about effortless action, but that's another subject. But I like this parallel a lot, and I think we can start to dive into compensation from this, because it's a hot subject, and usually KPIs are used to determine compensation. So I would like to talk about why compensation is a long time issue, and what is fair compensation, what type of effort is worth compensating, and who decides that. Because I like to see decentralized decision. I like to see groups of people deciding what is the standard payment for contributors, and the downside of this system, like people doing politics and talking with each other in order to bypass the system and get more rewards, because this is a thing that can happen. So why do you think compensation is a long time issue, and what is in your opinion fair compensation?
First of all, there's no DAO without incentives. I mean, not on the long term, because we can't and shouldn't fool ourselves. The tokens are in the middle of governance. So you need tokens to vote, whether you can buy them with money or you receive them for some trust or some early contribution. It doesn't really matter. The tokens are always in the middle of DAO. And fair contribution, I think, is a subject that we'll have to deal with a lot in the following years, so not months. I don't think this is going to be solved easily. First of all, we could look at fair compensation in terms of what your other teammates think about your work, right? Because you work in a team, your team knows best what you did, you know best what they did, and we already have some tools on this, right? We have Coordinate, for example. You simply give out gift tokens depending on how much work they did, how good their work was, and in the end you are compensated based on that. But I will tie this exactly to what you said, politics. There is no reason besides trust, obviously, and that's one of the most important aspects. There's no reason for politics not to appear. There's, again, no reason for people not to lobby themselves and their friends in a coordinated circle, but trust. So trust is the only thing that keeps us from doing that. How do you think trust is tied to this? And should we trust? How can we trust?
That's actually a good point. I think trust is very fragile, and it's basically a social agreement that people can break at any time. So this is a tricky part, and we have yet to find a solution for that. And I think Coordinate is actually doing a very good job, and they have tons of experience because Coordinate was born in year finance, and this was an issue there. And the way I think we can fix the trust issue is by using tools that act as proof of work, if it makes sense, like a tool that show your entire credential, what exactly you did in Web3, and that can be used can be used with POAPs and maybe NFTs. And I heard the folks from Coordinate talk about this because they don't want this tool to be used only for rewarding contributors. They also want to make it like a proof of works solution, a proof of work solution that shows what you have accomplished in Web3. And this can actually serve as a good solution for the trust issue because you know what a person is capable of. And another thing is that in traditional organizations, people can come with their CVs, and usually they lie a lot about what they have actually accomplished. And by using the blockchain technology, this issue can be actually removed. What is your opinion about this?
I definitely agree, and I'm so looking forward to decentralized identities and passports, and just as you said, proof of works in terms of what work you've done. Yeah. And as you said, Coordinate is doing a great job at this, and I'm sure that just as you said, we'll find more possibilities to use the tool not only for rewarding. But here comes the question. We have multiple types of contributors in DAOs, and for this reason, we need more types of compensation, right? We've got bounty hunters, we've got part-timers, we've got full-timers. How do you think the rewards for all of these types should differ?
I don't have an answer for that. And I don't have an answer for that because the groups of people that are working on those things should decide that. And it's going to be tricky. And I think good leaders, we need good leaders in DAOs for this specific purpose. And this also ties very well in our next subject, which is what does it mean to be a leader in a DAO? How are leaders born? Why is leadership important in DAOs, and the cool side of assuming responsibility? And what problem does this solve in the future of hierarchies in DAOs? So, what is a good leader in your opinion?
Do you mean a good leader in general or a good leader in DAOs?
Let's talk about Web3.
Okay, so the leadership subject is very, very dear to me. I like it a lot. I research it a
I
lot,
know.
and I try to write it as much as about it as much as I can. Um, a good leader, I think, in Web3 and DAOs is a transformational leader. So switching from transactional leaders that are, I would say, more common in tech businesses where you have stricter KPIs, where you have maybe in financial systems. Now, transformational leaders are, I think, the key to leading these large networks of people. They are able to mobilize lots of people at the same time with just their words. So simply being inspirational, encouraging you to be yourself, to learn more. So it's not something about hard skills. Obviously, you do need those because I think that a good leader always leads by example. So whatever you expect your teammates to do, you should be able to do, or at least know something about. So that when they come to you with some problems, you know what to tell them, you know what feedback to give, you have a direction. So simply steering the ship, I think, is the best thing a leader could do. And the best way to do this, I think, again, is through being inspirational. What about you? Do you see things differently?
No, I actually completely agree with you, and I think people should make the difference between a leader and a boss, because a leader actually does not give orders per se. He's there in order to guide people and start initiatives. And once those initiatives are started, he can actually put some gasoline on that and take things further. So, yeah, in that regard, I agree completely with the inspirational side of things. But I'm actually curious to know, how is a leader born in a DAO? Who chooses and appoints a leader? Is that something that ties into personal responsibility and assuming the leadership of a group, or is a leader elected?
That's a very good question. I think there are ways for both possibilities to happen. So naturally, leaders are born. Some leaders are born. That is, I mean, no one can argue with that. Some people are literally born to lead others. They have instincts. They take responsibility. They are accountable. All of this stuff. And for this reason, we have the rise of emergent leadership, right? In DAOs, we simply see people rise to the occasion and lead projects, lead people, lead initiatives, and so on. But then again, there's this other possibility where they are actually elected. There could be a group of people that may be confused as to who their leader is. That means that there is no natural born leader. So no one stepped up, right? You can clearly see who's going to lead. And I think that in this second case, having an elected leader is weaker than having a born or natural leader. Let's say that the second one happens. What do you do if your elected leader doesn't necessarily want to lead? What if they want to follow? What if no one wants to lead? What do you think?
I think the success of DAOs will actually rely on that, because, as I said earlier, leaders are the ones who are oftentimes leaders are the ones who start initiatives. And if an elected leader does not want to lead, the good thing to do is to say that and pass the leadership to somebody that is more courageous. And I actually believe that most of the times leaders are made. I don't necessarily agree with the fact that leaders are born, but I think that they are made, and that is through experience and trial and tribulations. So why is that important? Why is that such a vital subject in DAOs? Because in order to move and accomplish things, we need a sort of hierarchy. But what is the correct way to address this? How are we going to include more people in that? Because I I would like to see many leaders, not just a few. If that makes
Right,
sense.
right. Yeah, yeah, it absolutely does. And I think this has a lot to do with accountability. There are some people who will be comfortable with that, and there will be some who won't. I think bringing people and I don't know, maybe helping them be leaders is, as you said, a product of their work, their experience, and tribulations, all of that. So I completely agree when you said that leaders are made, but I don't think everyone can be a leader even with their experience and all that.
Right, because the way I'm thinking about things is like every person, and I'm happy to be challenged on this idea. Every member of a DAO is in a way a leader, because when you choose to work in a decentralized organization, you actually have to intrinsically have courage and assume personal responsibility. And I think DAOs are going to change the definition of a leader in the future.
Yeah, me too. And just so we get back to your question, why is this important in DAOs? Well, obviously because they are flatter or even completely flat. So, as you said, maybe hierarchical is not the perfect word to describe what should be happening or is happening in DAOs, but we clearly see that there's less hierarchy than in corporate culture, right? We see flatter organizations. And for this reason, it's easier for people to stand back instead of step up. I think this is why we see less leaders, because you don't necessarily have a place to go and talk about your achievements, tell your boss that, hey, I've done this and this, I deserve a promotion, I deserve a raise, and so on. And maybe when this is all on you, it's, I don't know, maybe you're not as incentivized as you are in a traditional corporation.
And that's why you have to rely on meritocracy, and that's why meritocracy is such an important subject. And people have to understand that most of the time, from what we've seen throughout history, you are not going to get rewarded for your effort right away. And I think that's a good and a bad thing. And why I say that is because a lot of people actually do stuff to impress, and that's not sustainable long term. And having skin in the game helps with that, and that's why Web3 credential and what Coordinate is trying to achieve is key in the industry. And I think we talked enough about this subject. What's next on our list?
Well, as usual, we'd like to look at some things that happened in the past week. And the first one would be a rabbit hole. And for those of you who don't know what rabbit hole is, well, I hope you will in the near future. They're teaching users how to onboard Web3 and contribute to decentralized apps. What they're doing basically is giving you on-chain credentials for completing some incentivized quests for earning Web3 skills. And they have recently launched these badges for their early contributors. And it's very interesting. They don't have a token yet. They are collaborating with some projects. For example, OpenSea is one of them, and I think they're doing a really good job teaching people about Web3. I don't know if incentivizing through financial merits is necessarily something I would go for. But the fact that these people that completed the quest received their badge is, as we just talked about, an on-chain credential, a proof of work, basically, or maybe a proof of learn, something along those lines.
Yeah, what I like a lot about Rabbit Hole is that it actually rewards people for being curious and learning about Web3. And I also like the phrase they're using, diving down the rabbit hole, because there's so much information in Web3. There is so many things that you can get lost into. And I wanted to ask you about this. How do you filter good information in Web3?
Curation is a perfect subject for discussion, but I fear we don't have enough time to talk about this in detail. But I will give you my take on this. I think that in order to have good and very good articles to learn from, and tweets and threads and all that, you need a specialized team of curators. You need people who are in Web3, who will be in Web3, and know what happened before they got into it. So some sort of historians, if you will, that know, that are able to filter what's good from what's not so good or maybe wrong, and can push people in the right direction. There's I don't think there's a right, or I mean, not necessarily right, but I don't think there's an immediate answer to your question, because this is something we're still dealing with. I know recently, I can't remember who, so my apologies for this. Someone has started a library on Web3 and DAOs. So things are currently ongoing, and this curating project is so interesting. I would love to contribute to that with my resources.
Yeah, I'm. Do you think having in a DAO, we are talking about in a DAO, do you think having a specialized team that is taking care of this is important? Because you will like a DAO to keep up with all the innovation in the space, and I think having a team that actually does the research on those and brings that to the community in bite-sized pieces is important. So do you think having that is a good thing?
Yeah, it is. However, I think that maybe not everyone should be reinventing the wheel. So maybe not every DAO should have their own team. I think that a service, maybe a service for DAOs, or simply a standalone service that teaches people, such as Rabbit Hole. Rabbit Hole is a great start. Is more valuable to everyone, because not as many resources and time is put into doing the same thing over and over again.
Right. So I know you found a very nice tool that is similar to Notion, and you said you want to talk a little bit about that. So yeah.
Yeah, I would love to. It's their name is Clarity. Clarity 2.0 rolled, I think, a few days ago. And what they're doing is building a Notion, but for Web3. And I've had some time to play with their product. I really liked it. And what I liked most about them personally is their introduction of plugins. And we've seen plugins in Mirror, and I'm a big fan of modularity, and I will definitely look more into these. And I think contributor experience is very important to us. And what they do is, besides this contributor experience part, you can gate documents with ERC20 tokens. So you can share documents in your DAO for people who do own the token, so people who've got skin in the game. Then they've got shared taskboards and payout bounties, and this can easily be done through connecting with your wallet. Have you had time to look over them?
Yeah, and I actually like the interface, and I actually see this tool being used by people, because organizing on Discord is not a good way of doing things, and I think we can agree on that. Good. So before ending the episode, I would like to recommend a few things. One is the Brave New Work book that I recently read, and I liked it a lot, by Aaron Dignan, that was also invited on the Chaser Chapman podcast. So I will leave a link to a workshop and a talk that he gave at Google for context. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, that's it, I think. Yeah.
So thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and see you on the next episode.
See you.
Cheers.
Bye.